Hello, marketers. This is the Funnel Lab, and welcome to Funnel Lab Fridays. I'm your host, Eric Westerkamp, CaliberMind CEO. Today, we're joined by Emma Phan, the Director of Marketing Operations and Analytics at Maven Clinic, and Nolan Garrido, our VP of Engineering here at CaliberMind. And today, Emma, Nolan, and myself are going to be talking about sort of improving win rates with AI summaries for sellers. Emma, Nolan, welcome to the to Funnel Lab Fridays.
Thank you.
So maybe Emma, could you start with just kind of telling us a little bit about Maven Clinic and your role over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Eric said, I'm the Director of Marketing Operations and Analytics at Maven Clinic. Maven is a women's and family healthcare company, and our 24/7 platform provides clinical, emotional, financial support for all in one place, from anyone from couples trying to start their family building journey all the way through women entering menopause and supporting them through that, with specific kind of emphasis on how we can help support you as you're working through each of those life stages. And so my focus, I sit within the growth org. We're really in the B2B growth org, and I'm really focused on the go-to-market technology, the analytics, the insights. How are we partnering across the growth organization to go to market to our prospects? And I've been there for a little 2.5 years, and excited. It's been a great industry to be in.
That's great, thanks. And Nolan, this may be your first time on our Funnel Lab Friday, maybe second time. Maybe you could just give a quick introduction of yourself and your background.
Yeah, so I've been with the company now for almost 7 years. One of the early employees of the company, leading a team of about 7 developers. We are growing very quickly, and we've got a lot of talent on our team around data engineering, around front end, and around building SaaS products. We've got a very aggressive roadmap, and we're excited to be building out things that are going to be propelling us in the AI sphere.
That's awesome. Thanks. Hey, maybe you could start with sort of a high level. What's from your perspective and from a sales and marketing perspective, talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with AI and how you're kind of looking at it to help your organization in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, taking a step back to what's really topical for us right now, and I think a lot of people across industries are feeling this, that it's really hard to get prospects' attention. There's a lot in the market. We're really inundated, and there's a lot of, costs. People are really thinking about costs. Their costs are high, and that's especially true in the healthcare industry. And so one of the things we're thinking about is, with the team that we have, how do we scale in a way that is still, sustainable, but hit those aggressive goals that we want to hit as a growth company? And AI is definitely very topical and something we're thinking about where and when the right places to use AI, both from a messaging standpoint. How do we do that and aggregate all this data that we're seeing and really tailor the messaging, because we know personalized messaging works the best. How do we cut through that noise with the sellers, and how do we serve up the data in a way that is useful and relevant without being overwhelming, since sellers have so many different things that they're working on in every given day. And I'm really focused on that right now, just given we're having to kind of react to the market and move quickly, and we want to make sure that the sellers are empowered with the data and insights that they need.
So maybe you could tell me a little bit about, what's your view on kind of how AI is going to start to interact with sellers and B2B selling teams, and where you think it's going to actually start to have some impact in those organizations?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that a lot of people have already dipped their toes in is, crafting messaging and, using ChatGPT, like all of those things to kind of get those messages out there. And I think that's one angle, but you also have to walk a line, because you don't want to start sounding like everyone else. And that's kind of the line that you need to walk on that. Where and this is probably my bias because I'm much more of a data person, but where I feel like we really could have that impact is, we have data across so many different platforms. We have intent, we have engagement data, we have seller data that we've entered in Salesforce, and sellers are moving through all those platforms. And how do we surface that data in a way and aggregate it? Whereas in the past, and even before, and I'll like kind of preview, the AI summary tool that CaliberMind's released has really changed that game, because I used to kind of have to do that. I would have to look at all the engagement data and how do I summarize this to a seller of what's going on in a given account. And being able to do that and allow the sellers to self-serve and really focus on the strategy of that account rather than trying to go through 30 touch points worth of data is really the thing where I see AI scaling in a way that still leverages the sellers and their knowledge and their strategic insight into those accounts while empowering them with the data that they need in order to help put their best foot forward.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we're seeing that across a lot of our customers where they're saying to us, hey, you've aggregated all this data, you have all this information about these accounts, you have data across, I think our average number of platforms is 8 to 10 platforms per customer for the data. I mean, Salesforce and, your marketing automation platform, whether it's Marketo or something like that, website hit, intent data, whether it's coming from a Bombora or a G2 or some other intent data source, right? And it's really hard for sellers to sort of just like get a big giant chart of touch points and here's everything that's happened and understand what to do with that, right? And so we're seeing a real need to kind of pull that stuff together, right? And would you see that's like, when you start to think about scaling sales, how do you see that start to help your organization scale what you're doing by having access to these kind of newer AI capabilities and tools?
Well, I think like it's time consuming to do that account research, to go between those 8 different platforms, to do all of that. I mean, the number of accounts you could prospect in a given day is going to go up dramatically if you have something that is doing a lot of that initial legwork and kind of groundwork to get that. You still need that human person to go look at it and be like, okay, this is the right way to message this. This product is going to be right for this individual, or these are the people I should go after. But having that whittled down into something that's consumable and manageable means that they're going to be able to go again across more accounts more quickly, means we can hit more accounts in a given week. Because also when it's harder to break into accounts, you have to go after more to keep that same number, the number of accounts you break into the same. And you only have so many hours in the day, as we all know. And so I think anything that can give you some of that time back to focus on the truly like important places we want sellers to be is super beneficial to us.
Yeah, no, that's great. Something we're seeing also is that a lot of organizations, they're really trying to figure out how to, outreach is really hard today. Like, I don't think any B2B company would say, hey man, our outreach is just everything we send out is, generating an inbound lead. So it's really hard to get into accounts and find and get people to respond. And so you need to target better. You need to make your messages more topical, but to do that, it's just more work. And so to be able to hand to a seller, like, here's what's really going on with this account, as they looked at intent data, they did this, somebody looked at this, now craft your message. I think it does help kind of those organizations start to scale, and pull this stuff together in a better way.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Nolan, let me kind of pitch over to you. From an engineering side, what's it been like, and what are some of the challenges that you've encountered? What kind of building these systems? Like, you're on the back end of it, and as I come to you and say, hey, Nolan, I want to implement, these 4 brand new things that I thought of last night, and you're like, okay, well, let's bring that down to reality. How are we going to really do it? What can we really deliver? How do we scale it? How do we do it in a cost-effective manner for our customers? What are some of the challenges that you've seen kind of on that side of things?
Yeah, well, as with most AI projects, the lion's share of the challenges is in the preparation of the data and getting it ready for use by the AI models. As Emma kind of alluded to, there's so many different first-party data sources that they have to, typical marketing team has to work with. Getting all those data sources to play nice together and be able to categorize them and group them and prepare that data, dedupe things like all that data engineering is, I think, the biggest challenge for getting the data for using AI models. At CaliberMind, we've spent a ton of time preparing our data for use by our customers in our BI layer. And so as part of that prep work, we were able to very easily, or I don't say easily, but it was a very straightforward pivot to move that data into an AI model for use to train those models. So I'd say first and foremost, the data engineering side is the biggest challenge. The second challenge, which Google made it a lot easier with the advent of Vertex AI and some of the other features that they have inside the platform, is getting that data into a system that can take large amounts of data and prepare those insights using all compute resources that will auto scale and build out the systems to deliver that data quickly and easily. And so the second less of a challenge was getting that set up, and then that was made easy by the Google Cloud Platform and their Vertex AI.
Yeah, we're a big, user of Google and a lot of their technologies because we found that by consolidating into one vendor and having these systems there, it really helps us, scale without having to always be looking for more software developers and things. And we get a lot of capabilities. One of the benefits also that we've seen there is, and that we're starting to see with these AI models, is that they're constantly improving, right? I mean, ChatGPT just released their newest, Strawberry 01 version the other week and has some great capabilities. Google responded literally next week with their .002 version of Gemini with a better price point stuff. But the nice thing about that is that once you start to embed these technologies in your products, you start to gain advantage. Like, Emma, you may not have noticed, but like literally that version of 002 was implemented a day later, and all these summaries got a little bit better, and there's a little bit more capability and some more stuff. The products that you build and deliver with these things can start to incrementally get better and scale better when you have these large organizations, investing, tens or hundreds of billions of dollars to refine these tools. And then suddenly everything you're doing out here can start to get a little bit incrementally better every time. Now let me ask you, kind of pivot a little bit. From a security perspective, Emma, one of the things that we have seen is that a lot of organizations really, the marketing and sales organizations wants a lot of access to these capabilities and tools. The legal department at the company is basically saying, like, you can't touch this stuff because of, a valid concern over the risk of their data and information effectively being transferred out to these platforms and stuff. How did you guys kind of work through some of those issues internally?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially given healthcare, we are in healthcare, and exactly. We have to be very careful. One of the ways we get around it, at least on my side, is I very much am clear the scope of things. We keep our system separate from the B2B marketing, the prospects, the employers, from the member data, because we do not want to have PHI, anything like that. And internally, we also, one of our values is keep healthcare human. And so there's a lot of talk about how does AI factor in on that, the product side of the house, given we want to keep, healthcare human. But I think really to focus on the B2B side, like it's been really specific on what types of data we allow. We're very strict with our privacy policies. We update it anytime another pixel or anything gets added to the site. Yeah. And we just started spun up kind of like an AI group that is thinking about this and kind of also just monitoring how we're using it at the company. And I think it's still really new and we're still figuring those things out. But I think we particularly have a lot of checks in place. I mean, any vendor goes through a really rigorous privacy like review if there are any impacts to that. And I think we're still making decisions and we're still being cautious about where and when we use things. And then also, even just from a security standpoint, like internally using Gemini versus, ChatGPT, like it has been a choice we've made as a company.
Yeah. We've run into this a lot. And one of the things that we've found is that, again, working very closely with Google, we've been able to go through and really look very deeply at like, how do they build, how do they train, what data do they use, right? And I think what a lot of organizations don't understand is that when you deploy an application that's embedding these capabilities and is designed properly, the data management and data control is actually relatively strict in that, like, your data sits in a project in Google. These models never train or use that data in the training, so that data never actually leaves those projects. Right? It's actually a big kind of layer of security between those models and that. And then they only really get combined at the presentation layer. Like you combine them, you ask a question, you pull it out, you present a summary. That really happens only in these projects. So it's actually relatively, from a data management and governance perspective, pretty safe as long as you're working with a vendor like Google. I think OpenAI has a lot of the same policies and stuff where they put some very strict controls in place around that, right? but you also have to make sure you're leveraging the right APIs and doing it in the right way to be able to take advantage of that when you combine the data. We see that a lot. We've got I'd say almost every company that we deal with, the marketing sales teams want a lot of access to these capabilities, but they're running into these issues. So they're looking for like, how do we talk to our legal department in a way that allows us to convince them that this is safe, right? Because they realize that all these other companies are starting to deploy these tools, and if they don't, they're going to be behind the bar.
Yeah. It's always walking that line. Like, we want to be compliant, we want to do right. And, and as a consumer myself, I want to be, treat people's data well, but it is also, if we are not doing this, we're going to be behind. And in a market that moves fast, we want any advantage we can get.
Yeah. All right. Last question before we go into tool time. When you look into the future, you see kind of some of the things that we're doing, some of the things that you're seeing with other vendors and stuff like that. What is sort of like the perfect AI world look like, for Emma and Maven Clinic, a year from now or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, right now, what is available to me in the AI summaries is very much one-to-one, looking up things one-to-one, which is great and a huge step up, and was kind of the thing that allowed me to share it with the sellers, because they don't want to look through 30 touch points of data. They need that summary. But where I see it going is, even yesterday, I got a list of 40 accounts that we're thinking about planning for next year, and how do we want to go after them? I don't want to sit there and look up the 40 accounts. No one really does. And so how do we do that at scale? How do we summarize that in a way that looks at that account list, knows that there's something in common, but that we may be going after them in different ways?
Yeah.
And even for us, like, we have different ways of getting into our prospects, and I'm sure this is true in a lot of different industries. We have brokers, consultants, kind of resellers, we have health plans, and there's different ways to go into those. And so how do we make the best decision for the account, given how they're engaging with marketing campaigns today, or the lack of engagement, and maybe they're not in the places we are currently marketing. So I see that. And then my even further future state is now knowing what we've done so far. What are the next accounts we should be prioritizing? How do we, we set a target account list sometimes at the beginning of the year, but halfway through it may be a different set of accounts that are going to be in market and the right people to go after. And how do we get ahead of that as early as possible, leveraging things like intent, leveraging things like the signals, how they're engaging, so that we're constantly evolving and iterating to make sure that we're really focusing our efforts in the right area. And I really think that could be a great place for this to go.
Yeah, right. So kind of pulling that data together and being able to kind of like look through a whole bunch of that information as opposed to each individual account time.
Yeah.
No, when Emma says that, like, what do you think about are the challenges? Like, okay, so now we want to do 40 accounts, not one. Like, what do you see as challenges around some of those things from an AI perspective and an LLM perspective?
Yeah, so one of the biggest hurdles that we've got to contend with is the limitations of the amount of data that you can send into these models. When you're dealing with, dozens, or in some cases, we probably want to, larger companies want to see hundreds of these companies and these buyer groups. How do you send thousands of events or hundreds of events per company into a model without, driving your costs up incredibly high? And in some cases, the model just won't accept it because it's just too much data.
Yeah.
And so trying to navigate that while these AI vendors continue to upgrade their systems, increase the amount of data you can send in, increase the or decrease the amount of time it takes to process that data. I think those are going to be the biggest challenges in terms of implementing this in some usable fashion for users of a system like ours.
Yeah.
I think that at the back end, that's UI aside, I think that's going to scale up faster than the front end side. But both are going to be challenges we're going to have to face in the next year or so. Yeah,
that's interesting. The context window that you get with these models, like it varies per model, varies per customer vendor. I think Google's claim to fame, I believe, is that they got a very big context window, right? OpenAI, smaller context window, but more kind of workflowy, descriptive capabilities on their side, right? We tend to go toward the larger context windows because of the applications that you're asking for. When you start to think about 40 companies with 100 touch points each, 4,000 lines of data, that can get to be a very large amount of data. When you ask these things to summarize it, just kind of under the covers a little bit, when we start to do those things, what we find is these LLMs can get, unless you prep that data very specifically, they can get lost in the data, right? And so the answers you get, so you have to be very careful about what you do with that data, then how you consolidate it and organize it to pass into these systems so they can actually give you answers that are meaningful. I think that's the power of having like sort of a data platform prepping this stuff, because that's the type of stuff that they can do. All right, I think we're going to jump into tool time here. So here we go. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to do a quick search, and this is for those of you joining us live on LinkedIn or YouTube now also. We're doing a quick search inside of the CaliberMind platform. What we want to show is some of the AI summary capabilities. But Emma's then going to walk through kind of like from her perspective, how they're using some of these same things with their sales teams. So I'm going to jump in, search on a company here, and boom, I'm bringing up the new Ask Cal tab here in CaliberMind, and bringing up a summary of data. And just for customers that are here, this is telling us a little bit about who are the people at the organization, what are the marketing activities, when did they come in, some of these things. But Emma, from your perspective, how do you guys use some of this information?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a couple applications. One of them lately, we identified kind of a new list of target accounts that we wanted to go after. And so we spent some time actually looking at the engagement score. And then I shared with each of the sellers themselves, they had a couple, like 10 accounts. This is how you go in and you look at these summaries, see what they've been engaging in, and like it all tells you different things. The intent data, maybe they're not actually engaging with our marketing campaigns. Maybe our marketing campaigns aren't hitting them, but they are showing intent in the areas that we want them to. And so that's, starting that sales outreach could be the right call there, because we may not be they may not come in inbound. You may need to go out and get them, but they are looking like they are in market. I kind of talked about this, but looking at a target list of accounts and understanding which ones have engagement versus which don't, and that dictating how we might want to try to break into those as the reps strategize with their SDRs and their different partners across the business.
Yeah.
And then I think even understanding, for me, I look a lot at close one accounts, at accounts that have moved into pipeline to see what did they do? Are there trends that we can see that are something we might want to apply? And honestly, one of the things that it paints to me again and again, and I think it paints a really good picture, because this is a story a lot of marketers share, is it's not just one channel. It's not just one thing. There's no silver bullet in marketing necessarily. There's a lot of pieces that go into this. There's the sales outreach. They're searching on, they're searching for Maven and clicking on our brand search ads. They're attending webinars, and really trying to understand what that ideal buyer journey looks like, and how we can continue to replicate that on companies that we don't have in pipeline yet.
Yeah. No, that's great. We use it internally a lot, where our sales team, we'll get something that kind of flags something as a marketing qualified account, right? And then one of our sales reps, the first thing they'll do is they'll come in here and they'll say like, oh, it just got flagged as an MQA, but that can happen for a lot of reasons. Engagement goes up to a certain level. They fill in a form, they ask for a demo, they whatever. And instead of going to, a big page like this, which is like, okay, let me see, in this case, it's a lot of intent data stuff, but boom, hundreds and hundreds of here, 163 marketing touch points. They can just come in here and be like, okay, what's going on? How long have they been involved? What are they doing? And they can craft that outbound kind of message that they may have and do an outreach. And we're actually playing around with, I don't know if you've seen this yet. I think is this
I've gotten a demo of it.
Like, boom, here, generate an outbound email, right? Now that for us, this is, our core value to customers is not that they use us to generate emails and do things like that. But what we're trying to do is start to experiment with, like, how do we go deeper around this data and help you out? Something you haven't seen that's coming out shortly is there's going to be a button like, tell me more about this company. And it's actually going to do like, are they public? Give me the information. What's their revenue? Things like that. This may be information you already have on the company, right? But what it can also do is say, like, tell me, like, are there any recent events that have happened at this company? And then pop this up, again, helping that seller pull this all together kind of all at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the difference to me in a sales rep using this data or not, because if you had to go back to that engagement tab and they would look at that engagement tab and say 163, I'm not going through that.
Yeah, like,
And
what
so I
what
think,
does this mean to me, right?
yeah, like what does this mean? And then
yeah.
And then they'd come back to me and ask, I don't know what this means. And so, that I do really think that is the differentiator, and this being useful for people who have 50 things on their to-do list during the day and don't want to spend too much time there.
We have a view here around analytics and data. Like, we're an analytics and data company for marketers, right? Mm-hmm. But my view is that if I could get away from charts and graphs completely, I would, because I feel like charts and graphs are a way of transmitting information that can be helpful, but is often not the best way for people to understand what's going on, right? What you really want is a system that can say, like, here's what's going on, here's some tactics, and here's what I'm seeing, and maybe even some recommendations on, and here's things that we've done to these types of accounts that have worked in the past. You may want to try these types of things on these accounts, right? In that more descriptive kind of interactive way than just charts and graphs and data like that. To that point, I'm going to kind of wrap with something I showed you briefly, but to your point, we're diving deeply technical here, right? But the ability now for these systems to be able to pull together a lot of this data, and this is where we're actually pulling together 30 companies and looking at the different stages in their funnel and like what's working by stage for a whole grouping of companies, right? To get this from a chart or a graph, you'd have to look across a lot of charts and a lot of data and interpret it, right? And that's where I think these systems are going, is like just, lots and lots of data out here, lots of data pipelines, right? Nolan, you're the one who knows what it takes to really move that data, at scale for companies. It's not easy. And then using the LLMs to interpret that and help you guys really figure out, okay, and then Emma, from your perspective, it's like, okay, where do I go drill in? Like now I'm a data analyst. I want to go look at data, but now I know where to go and what to go kind of focus on to really add value.
Yeah, it's like taking the data and going to the insights. And I feel like that's where we want to be, is in the insights and getting more of those, because you can get lost in the charts and the data, and having something that helps you point you in the right direction to then have your analyst go dig in further, I think would be a game changer, especially someone who has an analyst. And there is a lot of time exploring the data, and that takes a huge amount of effort before you get to the insights.
Yep. Well, great. Emma, Nolan, thank you so much for joining us this Friday. That's it for this Friday's Funnel Lab. Next week, we've got Kamala Thompson from the RevOps Co-op and our own Tara Wolt of CaliberMind going to be joining with Doug Bell. And they're going to be talking about the transition to engagement-centric marketing models, right? How do you move from managing a funnel by maybe discrete, this happened or this happened or this happened, now it's this stage, to a model where you're using things like how much engagement has the company shown for how you use that to really measure funnel stages and things like that, to better really understand where a company should be and how you should be focused on targeting it. Great. Nolan, Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.